Imagine the biggest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from India to Africa with a truly massive army. Now, picture a tiny, squabbling collection of city-states, armed with not much more than bronze and a wild new idea called freedom. When the great Persian king decided to crush this little pocket of defiance, everyone expected it to be over, fast. What they got instead was a series of legendary battles that would define the next 2,500 years of history. Back in the early 5th century BCE, the world had one superpower, the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Under its mighty king, Darius the Great, Persia was an incredible force of conquest. Its territory was vast, its bureaucracy was sharp, and its armies were enormous. The Persian kings called themselves the King of Kings and demanded that everyone submit to them, a tribute of earth and water to show their absolute power. For most of the known world, fighting back wasn't just pointless, it was unthinkable. But on the western edge of this massive empire, there was a peninsula full of mountains and stubborn people. This was Greece, a scattered bunch of independent city-states, or polis, who fought each other more often than anyone else. In the Persian-controlled area of Ionia, on the coast of modern-day Turkey, these Greek cities were tired of being ruled by Persian-appointed tyrants. In 499 BCE, they finally had enough and exploded into open rebellion. The Ionian Revolt began, and in a fateful moment of solidarity, the city of Athens and its ally Eretria sent ships and soldiers to help their fellow Greeks. Together, the rebels marched inland and burned the Persian provincial capital of Sardis. To King Darius, this was an insult he could not forgive. The Ionian revolt was eventually crushed, but the involvement of Athens had lit a fire in the king's mind. Darius famously ordered an aide to repeat the same words to him every single day. "Master, remember the Athenians." Darius swore he would get his revenge and snuff out the annoying little light of Greek independence for good. The stage was set for a clash of civilizations. 10 years after the revolt, in 490 BCE, Darius made his move. A massive Persian force sailed across the Aegean Sea, commanded by his top generals. After laying waste to cities that had helped the revolt, their fleet landed at a bay called Marathon, just 26 miles from a wide-open Athens. The Persian plan was simple: get the Athenian army to come out and fight, crush them on the open plain with their bigger army and cavalry, and then take the city. The Athenians were in a terrible spot. They begged for help from Sparta, the most feared military power in Greece. But the Spartans were in the middle of a religious festival and said they couldn't march until the next full moon. Athens was on its own, with only 1,000 soldiers from the small city of Plataea to back up their own army of about 9,000 citizen soldiers, called hoplites. They were outnumbered at least 2 to 1, maybe even more, though ancient numbers can be tricky to pin down. In Athens, a fierce debate broke out. Marching out to face the Persians looked like suicide. But one man, a brilliant general named Miltiades, argued they had to be bold. He knew how the Persians fought and believed the Greek hoplite, with his heavy bronze armor, big shield, and long spear, could win if they played it smart. He convinced the other generals, and the Athenian army marched to Marathon. For days, the two armies just stared each other down. Then, Miltiades saw his opening. The Persians had started loading their cavalry back onto the ships, probably to sail around and attack Athens directly. This was the moment the Persians were most vulnerable. Miltiades ordered the attack. He intentionally made his center weak and packed his flanks with soldiers. The Athenians then did something shocking. They charged across the plain at a dead run, which made the famous Persian archers far less effective. The armies crashed into each other. Just as Miltiades planned, the strong Persian center pushed the weak Athenian line back. But on the sides, the heavily armored Greeks demolished the lightly armed Persian troops. The Greek flanks then turned inward, wrapping around the Persian center in a devastating pincer move. The Persians panicked, broke ranks, and ran for their ships, with the Athenians right behind them. According to the historian Herodotus, the Greeks lost only 192 men. But the fight wasn't over. 10 years later, Darius's son, Xerxes, would be back to finish what his father started. In that critical decade, Athens, guided by the clever politician Themistocles, made a brilliant decision. They built a huge new navy of advanced warships called triremes. It was a choice that would soon decide the fate of Greece. In 480 BCE, Xerxes I launched the second Persian invasion of Greece. This wasn't just a punitive strike. This was an army of conquest on a scale the world had never witnessed, with a fleet of over 1,000 ships. Xerxes was here to completely absorb Greece into his empire. Facing this monster of an army, the bickering Greek city-states finally banded together in an alliance led by Sparta. Their strategy was to use Greece's mountains to their advantage, blocking the Persians at narrow passes where their sheer numbers wouldn't matter as much. The first stand took place at Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a tight coastal pass that was the gateway to central Greece. Here, a small Greek force of about 7,000 men, led by the Spartan king Leonidas and his personal guard of 300 elite soldiers, got ready to make their stand. For 3 days, this tiny Greek force held back the entire Persian army. The narrow pass was the perfect force multiplier, letting the Greeks' better armor and tight phalanx formation beat back wave after wave of Persian attacks, even against Xerxes' own elite unit, the Immortals. But on the third day, a local Greek trader showed the Persians a hidden mountain path, letting them surround the defenders. Knowing it was over, Leonidas sent most of the Greek army away to get ready for the next fight. He and his 300 Spartans, along with 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans, stayed behind to fight to the last man, buying precious time for the rest of Greece. Their heroic sacrifice became an immortal symbol of courage against impossible odds. With Thermopylae lost, the road to Athens was clear. The city was evacuated, and the Persians burned it to the ground. It seemed like all hope was gone. But Themistocles, the Athenian leader, had one last card to play. He tricked the enormous Persian fleet into the narrow straits between the island of Salamis and the coast. Xerxes, sitting on a golden throne on a nearby hill to watch his glorious victory, instead watched his fleet sail right into a trap. In the tight space, the Persians' numbers became a huge problem. Their ships were bigger and clumsier, and they quickly turned into a chaotic, congested mess. The smaller, faster Greek triremes, powered by citizen rowers fighting for their homes, literally rode circles around them, ramming and sinking ship after ship. The Battle of Salamis was a jaw-dropping, decisive victory for the Greeks. It crippled the Persian navy and forced Xerxes to flee back to Asia with a huge chunk of his army. The war wasn't quite over. The next year, in 479 BCE, the rest of the Persian army was finally crushed by the allied Greek forces at the Battle of Plataea, ending the Persian threat to the Greek mainland for good. The Greek victory in the Persian Wars was one of the biggest turning points in world history. It's one of history's great what-ifs. Had the Greeks lost, the world we know today might look completely different. It's argued that fledgling ideas of democracy, philosophy, theater, and individual liberty could have been snuffed out under Persian rule. Instead, the victory, especially for Athens, kicked off a golden age. With the Persian threat gone, Athens turned its defensive alliance, the Delian League, into its own maritime empire, using the League's money to fund an explosion of culture. It was in the 50 years after the Persian Wars that Athens built the stunning Parthenon on the Acropolis. It was when playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides basically invented tragedy, and when philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the groundwork for all of Western thought. Athenian democracy, tested and proven by war, grew even stronger. The wars also created a new sense of a shared Greek identity, a spirit forged in a common fight for survival. The wins at Marathon, Salamis, and Plataea became a legacy that inspired generations. They showed that free, unified citizens could defeat an empire built on total obedience. This small group of city-states didn't just save themselves. They arguably preserved the very idea of Western civilization, a legacy of freedom, reason, and humanism that still shapes our world. If you want to discover more stories of the battles that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The Greco-Persian Wars were more than just ancient history. They were a battle of ideas, the centralized, top-down power of the East versus the decentralized, citizen-powered cities of the West. The Greek victory wasn't a sure thing. It was earned with strategic genius, incredible sacrifice, and a stubborn refusal to be ruled. The world that came after, a world that gave us democracy, philosophy, and so much of our cultural DNA. was built on the foundation of their unbelievable triumph.